Hello friends, my name is Jerver. I watch BLs and talk about other queer things as well, and today I want to talk to you about some of my favorite queer films. Now, please keep in mind, this video could be 100 hours long. What I mean by that is that I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. I've told a lot of people in my life that growing up, I didn't have a lot of queer representation or any sort of queer person in my life to tell me that it was okay. So I gravitated to finding movies or television, anything I could find that led me to scouring the internet, finding YouTube videos of gay storylines from foreign shows, and going on to sites that were not necessarily legal. It became sort of a hyperfixation as I just tried to consume more and more and more to tell me that I was okay and valid in the world. And that gravitated to me now having an extensive knowledge of queer movies and TV shows across the globe. Meaning I have a letterbox list that is currently sitting at 233 queer films. But I'm not going to talk about all those today. What I'd like to do instead is just talk about 8 queer films that you may have seen or you may not have seen, but I think have beautiful stories and are worth watching. If you've seen these, watch them again. What's wrong with you? But also, if you haven't, I'm hoping you'll be able to watch some of these and get a new insight into different queer perspectives and representation across the country and across the world. That's right, baby. This list isn't just local. Who do you think I am? Starting off strong, we have one of my favorite coming-of-age movies, The Half of It from 2020. It's literally Sapphic Cyrano. What more do you want? Okay? This movie centers around a character named Ellie, a high schooler from a small town who accepts a deal with a guy named Paul to write a love letter for his crush, Aster. Throughout the Cyrano-ness of it all, Ellie realizes that she has a crush on Aster, but also realizes that her friendship with Paul is real and rooted and beautiful. This movie to me is not only beautiful in its queerness, but it's also beautiful in its quintessential coming-of-ageness. I recognize that I am a full-grown adult, but coming-of-age movies are still one of my favorite genres of movie. And I think part of the reason for it is because it is this idea of this defining characteristic that you decide to adopt at a point in your life. We could reduce coming of age movies to the idea of you becoming an adult at this moment, but that's not really what they're about. Coming of age movies are about you deciding who you want to be moving forward. And in that way, you have a movie where Ellie, Paul, and Aster decide who they want to be as time goes on. One of the other things that's really important about this movie, and it's something that I'll talk about in another movie I'll get into later on the list, is the idea of queer youth having experiences and being shown in television and movies. If you are not a queer person, every queer person that you do know at one point was a kid, and that can be a really confusing and terrifying experience. At worst, queer children are subject to abuse, neglect, abandonment, and oppression. And at best, you look at a bunch of movies, television, books, entertainment, people walking down the street, and you're rare to find people that look like you or love how you want to love. And while generational queer community is important, it's not always readily available. So you have a bunch of kids struggling to figure out what it means to navigate the world. Social media has absolutely helped. I think that queer children today have more access to not only people that look like them, but also kids that look like them and are able to navigate these spaces in a better way. But I think queer coming of age films is such a perfect combination of words because it's all about the idea of finding out who you are, learning about your identity and how you want to be treated or treat yourself in the world. A lot of coming of age films are also around high school where everything is happening to you for the first time. It's all strange and terrifying and it's hard to navigate. And so you have to make decisions day by day, step by step. I think Ellie as a character is such an interesting and important character to me because nothing is really wrong in her life. It's just stagnant. So for her to come of age, it's the idea of moving forward, figuring out how you want your life to be, who you want to be surrounded by, and what it means to move ahead into the future. Plus, it's a cloudy little town with an acoustic soundtrack in the background, and it just warmed my little emo heart. The Half of It also deserves praise because it is a mainstream movie to a certain extent. It is a Netflix original, and so it was able to get a bunch of praise and promotion, but not every queer movie has that or has had that, but they still deserve your love. And that's why I'm here to talk about French-Canadian film Lilies from 1996. If you know me, I will not shut up about this movie. So to set the stage, Simone, who is in prison for life, gives a request to get confessional at the jail church by a priest, a very specific priest. That priest then gets locked in the confessional as the rest of the prisoners put on a play about the life of Simone and the priest. Why? Because those two men knew each other as boys in a small French-Canadian village where their lives were turned upside down in a few months leading up to Simone's arrest. The movie itself is based off of a play, and my word, does it feel like it in the best best way. This movie is romantic in every sense of the word. It literally lifts itself out of the jail into this wonderful, beautiful, scenic small village where every character feels alive and Shakespearean as they're all played by men, but after a certain point, you don't even notice anymore. The language is colorful, the journey is smooth and romantic, the story takes you to highs and lows. I can't talk enough about this movie. I think when it comes to a lot of queer movies in the West, there's this need for realism, and it makes sense. We need to have more representation. We need to show these people who are not giving us the things that we want or need as far as laws and policies and just representation in the world, that we exist, that we're here, that we matter, and that our stories have nuance and definition and interest. But one of the things that makes me sad personally is that I'm a huge nerd. I love romance and fantasy and different ways of storytelling, and sometimes that can get lost for the sake of realism. And my word, does this not happen in this movie. This movie is a tragedy. Obviously, we know that this man is going to end up in prison, but that doesn't stop the movie or the play within the movie from having so much love and yearning and excitement within it. If I had millions of dollars, I would turn this back into a play. Like, I want to live in this world so much, and I want other people to live in it too. Just a little bit of spoilers. One of my favorite things about this movie is Simone's love interest, Valier, and his mother. When the movie begins, or the play begins, Valier and Simone are already in a relationship with each other in secret, but they live very, very different lives. Valier is one of the poorest in the village, and his mother has some sort of psychosis. She has been abandoned by her husband, but she is trying to convince everyone, and mostly herself, that he is a very rich noble in Paris and at some point will come back to get her and her son. While yes, obviously I'm here for the gay and I love the gay, this man's portrayal of this like Shakespearean tragic mother is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life with my eyes. And the movie goes on to show how beautiful she is even in her insanity. Yes, she's not telling the truth, and yes, she's constantly trying to convince other people and herself that she wasn't abandoned. But at the end of the day, what she really wants is to love her son and to make sure that he's safe. That's sort of where this insanity came from. She didn't want to be left, but she didn't want her kid to be left. And so she's trying her best to make up a world because that's all she can do. I could write a dissertation about every single character in this movie. The point is that you should watch it. It's fantastic, and I know a lot of people have not heard of it because I hadn't heard of it, but it's been literally my favorite for years, so I'm never going to shut up about it. However, I will switch to a different movie, but speaking of beautiful tragedies, girl, we're still in it. This time we're going to talk about BPM, Beats Per Minute, a French movie from 2017. Now, trigger warning. This movie is about AIDS. If I'm being very honest, I treat movies about HIV and AIDS like I do slave movies at this point. I think that there's value. I think that people need to see them, educate themselves. I've seen too many. I don't need to see any more. That being said, I watched BPM online, rented it online, and then bought it physically immediately after the credits rolled. BPM is about a section of the organization ACT UP, specifically in France in the 80s. If you don't know what ACT UP is, it was a coalition of queer people radicalizing and vocalizing the need for safety, support, and education around HIV and AIDS, because for a very long time, it was seen as a gay disease and therefore left up to queer people to sort of die. Another movie that's not on this list, The Normal Heart, does a lot of educating about the early days of the AIDS epidemic. It talks a lot about how when it was realized that this was mostly affecting queer men, research was cut, funding was cut, and a lot of politicians refused to talk about the subject while people were dying. And while there were small sections of scientists and politicians trying to push the narrative in actual policy, ACT UP was on the streets doing protests, doing sit-ins, doing constant demonstrations to make sure that the queer people who were dying were not to be forgotten. And for BPM, not being forgotten is the banner headline of the movie. I think one of the really important things about BPM for me personally, and why I see it differently than a lot of other HIV/AIDS movies, is that while those movies need to be graphic and intense in order to tell the story and push this narrative to people that, hey, this was really tragic and preventable, this movie does a good job of explaining that without making the audience feel isolated or triggered. Many of the characters that we follow, in fact, the main character that we follow does have HIV and knows at some point that he's going to die and the government might not do anything about it. The movie doesn't wallow in that sadness. It doesn't try to ask you to wallow in his sadness and pain with him. In fact, it tries to get you to literally act up. It shows you what it meant for these people at the time to fight. It shows you how they fought, how they internally fought, how they attacked the system, and what it meant to be fighting this thing that you knew was overtaking you and at some point going to take you out of the game. It's beautifully shot, it's romantic at times, it's cinematography, and it doesn't treat these people like tragedy cases or cautionary tales. It treats them like real people who are going through a real tough time and trying to fight back at the system that doesn't want anything to do with them. There's one scene that I'm not going to spoil that is incredibly sad and just hurts in its grounded realism that doesn't pull any punches. But then you have the final scene that I'm also not going to spoil that is both tragic and celebratory at the same time. And that's sort of why I love this movie. It tries to celebrate queer people at the same time of explaining this tragic time that we had in the 80s. And again, this is not to knock like The Normal Heart or How to Survive a Plague, stories and movies and content that shows how tragic and real this was and how all of this could have been prevented. We need those things, and those things educate people who weren't aware of how bad it got or weren't there to see it. But I'm a big proponent of queer joy, and we need to prove to ourselves that we weren't just tragedies waiting to be discarded, but instead thriving through anything, including political oppression and sickness. We lost people, but those people also had lives, and those lives are beautiful whether or not the government decides that it is. And I think that's what this movie does so beautifully. All right, that was dark. Let's get happy and let's talk about Cherry Magic, the movie. Now, this is actually kind of cheating because you have to watch Cherry Magic, the TV show before you watch the movie, but also watch Cherry Magic, the TV show, and then watch the movie. Cherry Magic, or full title, Cherry Magic 30 Years of Virginity Can Make You a Wizard? Yes, the question mark is a part of it, is one of my favorite BLs of all time, as probably yours if you've watched BLs before. It is not a hard story to understand, okay? Adachi, an office worker, turns 30, he's never had sex before, and then he realizes because he's a virgin that now he can read people's minds when he touches them. It's so simple. In that way, he then accidentally touches the hottest guy at the office and realizes that that hot guy has a crush on him. This show is campy, it's sweet, it's ridiculous, it's beautiful, and one of the things that I think I love about it is the message behind the love story. That message being that living honestly and your truth is way more important and way better than hiding in your insecurities. And that's not just for our main character. That's for Adachi, that's for his love interest Kurosawa, that's for several people that he works with. Throughout the entire show, Adachi uses his powers kind of accidentally to show people who they are and what they've been hiding when they're thinking nobody's listening, you know, because it's in their head. The main character gains a love story, but he also gains respect and love from his friends because due to his new ability and the hijinks that ensue, he shows his beautiful soul and shows other people how they can also live authentically. I also think that one of the big important things of both the show and the movie is showcasing this love that these two characters have, even in a place like Japan that doesn't have a lot of policy backing and supporting queer people. In Cherry Magic, the show and the movie, Adachi and his love interest Kurosawa never come out to their co-workers. This is probably in part because there's no legal protection for queer people in Japan in the workplace. You can get fired based off of your lifestyle very easily. But again, the show is bright, it's beautiful, and you almost miss this part of the story if you're not paying attention. Spoilers, but one of the things that happens in the movie is that Adachi gets moved to a different branch of his office in order to help with a project. He gets so overworked that at one point he collapses and ends up in the hospital. This leads to Adachi telling Kurosawa that he wants to come out to his family, not to the work, but to his family. This is because when work found out that he was in an accident and needed to go to the hospital, they called his family because that's his emergency contact. But then no one thought to tell Kurosawa because they don't know that they're together. So circumnavigating the idea of not being able to come out to your work actually shows a character coming out to his parents and learning what that looks like and if there's validation in that and then their family. The show definitely has more hijinks and more ridiculousness than the movie, but both of them have this earnestness and this sweetness to it that is just so inviting and so beautiful. I don't I can't say more. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Watch it, please. Speaking of love, I have to talk about Straight Up from 2019, another movie that I will never shut up about. Straight Up is about a character named Todd who is incredibly lonely, but also doesn't like when people touch him, especially men. So he decides that he wants to experiment with straightness and meets a young woman named Rory, who is, by all accounts, his soulmate. Rory has her own hangups, triggers, and anxiety around touch and around intimacy, so they end up developing into this relationship that is awkward, uncomfortable, funny, ridiculous, very reminiscent of how fast the characters in Gilmore Girls talk, and is a wonderful, beautiful movie about trauma. I invite everyone to watch this movie, but especially if you've dealt with any sort of sexual trauma, this movie talks about this in such a beautiful, open, and realistic way. Todd and Rory have a absolutely beautiful relationship in so many ways, except for the fact that Todd is gay and Rory isn't. But what starts off as a ridiculous hijinks like interaction and cohabitation more and more unveils itself to be about trauma, to be about anxiety around touch, around loneliness, and around partnership. James Sweeney is the guy who plays Todd. He also wrote the story, and he also wrote another movie, Twinless, that's coming out very soon. I will follow him everywhere because of the writing of this movie. One of my favorite things as a writer is dialogue. I love dialogue. I love snappy, interesting, witty, complex, complicated dialogue that gets to the root of people's problems and issues and goes back and forth in this wonderful volley. And God, this movie gives it to you truckload. I cannot stress this enough. If you've seen Gilmore Girls, it is that like on 2x speed. I think what's wonderful about this movie is that while a lot of queer movies are beautiful and romantic and wonderful, a lot of queer movies also really focus on the idea of sex. And again, that has merit. Similar to organizations like ACT UP and the history of pride parades, the idea of sexual liberation is one of the really important things that the queer community has. It's a defiant rallying cry to not only validate the people around you, but also show the oppressors that sex and queer sex is not a bad thing. But also sometimes queer people who don't want to have sex or have issues with sex can get overshadowed by that loud cry. And this movie really does a good job of diving deep into that conversation. Todd as a character doesn't hate his gayness. He doesn't hate gay people. He has a very interesting, complex issue, and he's trying to navigate how to deal with it. And also, one of the beautiful things I love about this movie is that he's also getting flack from other people, other gay men who are telling him that he can't do it this way. I personally relate to this movie in a lot of ways, and it felt very healing and very validating, but it's also just a good, funny time. At times it can get really deep and sad. You'll notice that that's sort of a thing for me, but it has a hopeful, beautiful, happy ending, I promise. Now, I'll warn you that this next movie is not happy. Just warning. That's because I'm talking about The Paradise of Thorns, a Thai movie from 2024. I did not say Thai BL. Please know that I didn't say BL. This is a horror movie? Suspenseful thriller. Let's say it's a suspenseful thriller. This movie centers around a group of characters, but it's actually easier to talk about the farm that it centers around. Because when a man named Sek dies, his durian farm is seized by his mother and his mother's aide, in spite of the fact that his unmarried boyfriend, Tongkam, already lives there. What follows is a lot, girl. Deception, lies, chaos, past lies, future lies, kind of murder. Murders happen. It's a lot of conversations about poverty, about class war, about who belongs to what, about queer relationships and straight relationships and the validity of those relationships. Also, while this is not the main point of the story, they do slip in the idea of gay marriage because at the time that this movie was being made and came out, Thailand had not legalized same-sex marriage yet. They recently did. Shout out to that. In the story, Tongkam is there when Sek gets injured. He takes him to the hospital, but the hospital informs him that they cannot operate on Sek without approval from a next of kin. Tongkam and Sek have had some sort of domestic ceremony to claim their love and marriage, but their marriage is not legally recognized by the country. And because the mother gets there too late to the hospital, Sek dies. This feels like a spoiler, but it's actually really how the movie begins. The bigger story is about this land, who owns it, who has claim to it, and how this back and forth and violence against each other sort of spoils it for everybody. It is dark, it is intense, it is crazy, it is crazy. But I do like that. A lot of queer movies tend to focus on love. And again, there's merit to that, recognizing and understanding that love is a beautiful thing. And also that we need to tell both ourselves and people outside of the community that our love is real, it's valid, and it's important. But also, one of the things that I love about BL and about this movie and other movies that I've seen is that queer relationships existing as leads in a completely different genre is something that is possible and that we need to see more of. Our main character in this movie is a gay man. Gay stuff happens on screen, but the story is not about love. It's about class and this farm that we just need to get rid of, Diva. It's too much. One of the things that I love about all the BLs that I've seen is I've seen stories with mafia bosses, with body swapping, with parallel universes, with chaos and suspense and thrillers and vampires and all this other craziness with queer characters as leads. And I think this fits also uniquely into that category, and it's really, really cool to watch. Now, obviously, if you're not a suspense person, this movie is not for you. But it's really good. So let's talk about one more dark movie, and then I promise I'll end on a happy note. But I could not make this video without talking about We the Animals from 2018. We the Animals is a very, very different type of coming of age movie. This movie is about three boys, Manny, Joel, and Jonah, who are severely emotionally neglected because of their parents' chaotic relationship. Most of the movie involves these three boys going to school by themselves, wandering the woods by themselves, trying to find food by themselves. Their father feels angry and violent while he's there, and then sometimes he's just not, and the mother essentially goes into a fugue state when the father disappears. So what you get is three boys who are trying to grow up without any understanding of what that looks like. And what you also get is youngest boy Jonah understanding that he is very different and very queer. This movie is both chaotic and quiet. It's beautifully shot. It feels slow at times and then ramps up at other times. You watch these kids harden and you want to save them, but you also know that there's nothing that you can do to save them. And you also watch the youngest one, Jonah, start to understand a little bit more of who he is, and then the fear that comes with acknowledging that. Again, like the half of it, I think it's important to talk about queer kids and what that journey looks like and how tumultuous or supportive it could be. The movie deals with something I think a lot of other stories are kind of scared to deal with, the idea that yes, queer people were queer youth, but also we were queer youth before puberty happened. So what does it mean for a character to look at a boy or look at a scene in a movie or a TV show and not understand exactly what they're feeling? And what does that mean when they have no emotional, supportive, or empathetic parents to help them through those feelings? Chaos. The answer is chaos. The answer is sadness and chaos. One of the things that I love and have studied a lot about is psychology around masculinity and boys. And one of the things that really, really hurts them is the isolation and emotional neglect. Boys are taught to repress, they're taught to suppress, they're taught to push their emotions away as if they don't even exist. They're taught to not see women as people or peers or equals. And they're taught these things by other boys and men. So while the half of it ends on a period or let's say an ellipses, We the Animals to me leaves on a question mark. If this little boy has nothing but questions, emotions, and chaos, who is he going to be? Whew, girl, it's a lot, but it's a beautiful film if you can handle it. And finally, we're going to talk about a rom-com, okay? We're going to talk about a rom-com, Diva, because we were talking about I Think I Do from 1997. If you've never heard of this movie, that is okay, but please know there are a bunch of queer films that were made in the 90s that are beautiful, romantic, hilarious, and that we all need to know more about. And I Think I Do is one of those movies. I Think I Do is about a bunch of college friends reuniting as two of them are about to get married. Those college friends had a bit of a split as one of them, Bob, started having feelings for his roommate and best friend, Brendan. But this is a rom-com, baby. You know what's coming. As we get closer and closer to the wedding, we find out that Brendan actually has feelings for Bob and always has, and is trying to convince him and win him back during the wedding shenanigans. If you like rom-coms and you like 90s rom-coms specifically, you will not be disappointed. It also stars Guillermo Diaz as a straight man because for some reason that actual gay man can never be cast as a gay man. And it also stars Alexis Arquette pre-transition, RIP to the GOAT. And one of the beautiful things I will say is that while this movie's initial run probably had Alexis's dead name, they actually changed all the credits to say Alexis Arquette in both the streaming versions and the actual physical copy that I have. But yeah, this movie, I don't have a lot of like eloquent, beautiful flowery things to say about this film. It's just a good time. If you love When Harry Met Sally or Groundhog Day and things like that, you will love this movie as well. It's just the fact that there's two gay leads that are telling this romantic comedic story. All of the friends are ridiculous. Bob is dating a soap opera star who acts dramatic and crazy. Like, it's just stupid fun. And at the end of the day, that's sort of what I want. I want queer people to be fun and romantic and beautiful and ridiculous and fantastical and go on crazy journeys throughout space and time, etc. I watch BLs for this exact reason, but also there are other movies and TV shows around the world that also do this. You just have to go find them. So if you have a favorite queer film that you feel a lot of people aren't talking about, please let me know in the comments. Be nice in there, please. And also you could subscribe. There's like a bell. You could hit the bell. I'm learning how to say words and I'm gonna get there.